Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about forgiveness. I am one of the co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I am accompanied by the legendary Sam Simmons. And I know he hates when I say the legendary, but he's a legend, in many different aspects. How you doing today, Sam?
I'm okay. I'm not gonna go in my little tire. Yes, I am. This legend stuff. Man. You know how I feel. You do this. You do it on purpose. You know how I feel about that.
It's okay to be a legend. It's okay to, get your flowers while you're still here. So many people get flowers that don't deserve them. Take yours. It's okay. That's a whole nother conversation. I shouldn't even have said that.
No. Yeah. You. Oh my goodness. So yeah, we're gonna talk about forgiveness today. Yeah, at least give it an attempt. Um, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about forgiveness is I've found over the years in doing this healing work, and healing work or doing this work around working with people around healing.
Mhm.
Uh, um, the thing that has surprised me in dealing with my Black clients, the Black community in general, uh, as a community that is known to be um, one of the most religious communities in our country. I mean, it's not a secret that folks talk about Black community being very, very religious, right? And the community in many ways pride themselves about that. How much difficulty my clients and individuals in the community have with forgiveness.
Mm.
And and when I realized that, and especially working with my clients, when I realized that and try to put my mind around it, it's and I think I have some ideas about why that is, but and I think part of it is our understanding of forgiveness given to people, especially when growing up, and that piece we often talk about, not having a framework to talk about the trauma done to us by each other within the community. As easy as we like to talk about trauma done to us by folks, by systems, and by folks outside the community, um, I think has something to do with that. But yeah, that's why that's why I wanted to talk about, especially after our conversation last week about how do we have conversations about trauma that occurs within family. Do we do our healing first, or do we before we have this conversation with family members and those kind of things? And been thinking about this all week. What's your thought about this whole thing? What has been your experience in your work? In terms of, does the issue of forgiveness ever come up?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the pieces that I include in a few of the curriculums that I've developed is forgiveness. 'Cause I think it's an important part to incorporate in our what I call our healing journey, in this experience that we go through, dealing with our trauma, dealing with our current states of being, and also dealing with our identity, that so many of us have been hurt, or we've been mistreated or sabotaged by other people, that at some point in time you have to face that element of forgiveness. And one of the things that I always found fascinating is the question: is it harder to forgive yourself or someone else? And I think that that's a huge question in our development to answer, because many people don't forgive themselves. I'm thinking of one of my client that I have right now. I was talking to her a few days ago, and she's made some decisions in her life that she kind of regrets. And I asked her, well, do you forgive yourself for those things? And she couldn't even answer the question. I mean, literally, we spent about 20 minutes just talking about that, because it was so painful for her to even accept some of the responsibility in those actions that she took. I mean, these are decisions she made. And I said, I think one of the reasons why you reached out to me for help, and one of the things that you need to kind of get over, one of the hurdles, is learning how to accept the things that have happened. And I think that forgiveness is really about accepting some of the things that have taken place, but also figuring out the best ways to deal with them as you move forward, whether that's other people, whether that's just accepting, the events that took place or whatever the case may be. But really, forgiveness to me is more of an action than just a state of, thought or a state of feeling. So that's kind of where I've been at with the concept of forgiveness.
And I think what you just talked about, I found to be true with, especially with the men. I haven't really had a lot of conversation about forgiveness with the women, although I have had conversations with female practitioners who actually had problems with forgiveness. Right, these are folks doing the work. Right, but I find that as a big piece. People who have difficulty forgiving themselves have difficulty forgiving. Right, and I remember I had a conversation on a radio show once with one of our community leaders that I actually have some actual respect. Young leaders I actually have some respect for, who really had difficulties with this whole concept of forgiveness. He didn't think it was possible. He literally, and when he said it, I thought he was just joking. He was serious as a heart attack. I was like, whoa, this is some deep stuff, right? Um, and so that whole piece of allowing yourself to forgive yourself, right, is a real major piece in our community. And again, I still find it difficult to understand that under the circumstances, especially under this framework of faith and religion and all these other kind of things. But again, at the same time, I shouldn't be surprised because I grew up with a confused belief about forgiveness. Because I came out of a fairly religious family, and I remember being told by my grandmother that you just put a forgive and forget. And the problem I was having growing up is I never forgot. So
Right.
I thought I could never ever forgive.
Right.
Especially when somebody's dropping that nugget on you. You need to forgive and forget, and it's like, and you can't
Right.
forget, and it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. So I think, it's really about, what people's whole thing around what's their understanding about, forgiveness. I have learned that forgetting is not necessarily that the part that's the most important part of forgiveness,
Right.
right? Because if you look at the forgetting part means to deny what happened,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
then protecting and actually acting like everything is fine.
Yeah.
Uh, when it really isn't, right?
Right.
Because genuine forgiveness cannot be offered if the anger and resentment are denied or ignored.
Hmm.
Those feelings are real.
Right.
And I think that's another thing around that whole issue of anger is attached to that too, right?
Right.
Can I be angry and forgive?
Mhm.
Uh, is it just an act, right?
Right.
It's just something I go through, to act like it's just fine when, I still got grudges. And that whole word grudges, it's also interesting how many people have difficulty forgiving and how many people hold grudges. I mean, serious
Mm.
grudges
Yeah.
and resentments, hardcore grudges. And I've known folks who be proud of their little grudges that they hold. You know,
Right.
uh, you know, I grew up with a major grudge master. My mother was a major grudge master. If she had a grudge against you, it was it was on and popping. you
Mm.
know, and she would play the play that victim piece all the time and smile in your face and whatever, and just do little subtle stuff to you to the point where you think you're going crazy, and then say, "What do you mean?"
Mm.
You know, I mean, this little nasty kind of stuff, that whole thing around being a perpetrator in a victim position,
Right.
kind of deal. Um, but I know that if I didn't get a handle around the forgiveness part, I wouldn't have made the improvements in my life that I had to make.
Mm.
Uh, um, um, with my family, um, with my community, uh, you know, because I was carrying a lot of unnecessary baggage with holding on to those resentments, right? And that inability to forgive. And I think that's the big piece is what is forgiveness really all about?
Right.
Forgiveness is really about the person, the victim of the situation. Is like, do you wish to continue to be angry when in a lot of cases, if you and that person ain't, even if you're in the same house, might not be carrying any baggage, right? Yeah, at all. So you carrying all this baggage of anger and resentment, and because I've seen families who literally would not see each other, and hold situations where grandkids didn't meet the grandparents, and all these other pieces, um, and and unfortunately wait until deathbed confessions and
Hmm.
deathbed forgiveness, or even after death confessions. It's like, everybody come together, and certain cousins and stuff ain't seen each other and all like that, and then all of a sudden everybody start hearing the stories.
Right.
Another victim of that code of family silence,
Right.
right? Sometimes that silence, not having another ear to talk about those certain things. And the worst ones that I've dealt with in dealing with clients is the grudges or resentments that are held on a person, and the other person don't have no clue about it.
Right.
They just might have went on about their day, might have had a bad day that day or whatever. And whatever happened, they don't even remember,
Hmm.
right? Because they didn't see it that way. But you got this person holding this grudge, and you hear these stories and movies and stuff like that, where this person has had grudges for years, right? And the other person is walking on their life all happy, and I've seen folks who have the grudges and have this anger and this bitterness, and the bitterness consume their lives to the point where they in had issues with chemicals, relationship issues, and all like that, because they was holding this bitterness. And maybe
Right.
their partner would say, maybe you should, give them a call. I'm not, feeling like everybody's against them and those kind of things. So it's a very major problem, I think.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, a grudge is really just like unresolved pain that the
Right.
person has on their end. And, you know, when you're not attempting to address those issues, it's easy to hold a grudge because you're usually putting the responsibility on the other party or the other people to come and solve the problem and the initial pain, hurt, betrayal, whatever the case may have been. And with grudges, unfortunately the person who ends up hurt the most is the person who has the grudge, which is one of the craziest pieces to it from my standpoint. I think you end up harboring and holding on to that pain without any resolve. And a lot of times, sometimes people don't even know that you have a grudge for something that they've done or that they've did to you. And I think it's important, and that this is why transparency, I think, is key to healing, is being able to find a space and a place to share that some harm or hurt has been done to you, so that you don't end up stuck in this place of having grudges. And I think also grudges get in the way of our opportunities to connect with the people that we care about as well.
Yes. I remember there's a story that comes to mind, that one of my mentors. And you know how I feel about that mentor word, but I'm gonna use it because that's I could that's the easiest way to explain it for folks listening is Mr. Bransford, who used to go around telling everybody I was his son,
Mhm.
and actually folks really believed that. Well, he treated me like one, you know. And he told me the story about his name. His name is James Bransford, and he's the oldest boy in the family, and his brother was named Junior.
Mhm.
He was the junior in the family. And he said, "Man, I spent a long time in my life, you know,
Mhm.
um, being resentful of my mother,
Mhm.
right? About why wasn't I worthy of the junior title,
Mhm.
right?" And somewhere along the line, the conversation came up, and she explained to him that he is named after his I think, great grandfather, James. Okay. And the reason he's named his great grandfather is because his father told his mother, "You can name your firstborn any name you want,"
Mhm.
right? And she admired her grandfather so much, she named him James.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he tells that story to help and I heard him tell it amongst clients, and actually even in times he spoke on the whole idea of holding a grudge. And he was an adult when they had this conversation,
Mhm.
right? And the idea that we hold on to stuff but we don't talk about stuff,
Right.
and the unnecessary anxiety and feelings that he had um towards this whole ideal that is, might have had an effect on his relationship with his mother was
Right.
so unnecessary. And so, which brings up that whole idea of the ability to actually talk about things, to have conversations, you know, um, emotional conversations without um, over top responses, right? That fear of getting the truth, but at the same time, want to have all these conversations about healing, which in my book many times is real surface conversations about healing. But this forgiveness and forgiving, or letting go, right,
Mhm.
of things, and see, and again, it's not about forgetting what happened. It's about being able to learn how to move on and live, right?
Right. Right.
And until uh, that's one of them big factors that as a people and as individuals we really need to get a handle on. And I know it's real difficult when we start talking about bigger issues, but I've seen black individuals show more forgiveness to white individuals than black, which is amazing to me.
Mm. Mm. Anti-blackness. Yeah.
It's like even in their own
Mhm.
family, you know
Mhm.
how how these folks get on my nerves, with this, the white community always like to drag somebody on black
Mm.
to talk about how much they forgive, you know, uh, 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 you know, and that kind of thing. How much they forgive. Uh, 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 Look at these fine black folks. They done forgave these people, and I remember when they had the shooting of the little white boy who shot in Charleston, South Carolina,
Dylan
and
Roof. Yeah.
yeah, and Mother Emanuel. And I should check up on this. Is that I'm from Charleston, South Carolina,
Hmm.
and um, um, I wouldn't, I was trying to get more information, even though I don't have as much connection with my family down there as I probably could. And that's also due to old family resentments and religion, which is this bizarre that I don't have the connection with my family, right? That I
Yeah.
probably should. We have connections on Facebook, which is superficial, but we don't have no kind of conversation that possibly one of those folks was our cousin, or
Mm.
like a third cousin or whatever.
Hmm.
But I know the church because, like I said, I'm from Charleston, downtown Charleston, pretty white church and that kind of stuff. And I remember they, had different members of the families on there talking about their forgiveness. And I watched the little niece of the daughter in the background. She
Hmm.
wasn't trying to have it. She was like,
Right.
and it was so, and we're so quick to, and especially the white community, so quick to drag out black faces and
Hmm.
see, you're so, yeah, oh yeah, we're so forgiving, right? We're so
Hmm.
resilient, you know. We know how to roll. Well, if you're only known for rolling with the punches, why should I stop giving them to you?
Mm. Right. Yeah. You expect them, and they're coming. So this is what you want. This is what you're gonna get.
Right.
Mm.
And I found that there's some people who are more comfortable being angry than being happy.
Mm. Mm.
I mean, I hate to say that, but I've found folks that it's like and I think that's that whole thing about if you get to that whole thing about not being too happy.
Right.
What you got, what you got to smile about. I've heard folks in the community say that to like kids and stuff. What
Yeah.
you got to smile about?
Yeah.
You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
why?
What's so funny? That's something I
Right,
hear a lot.
right, right. Like,
What's so damn funny?
yeah, it's like whoa.
Mm.
So, and then the other thing about forgiveness, and this is some of that family stuff. You have somebody who does something to you in your family, um, and it was bad, right?
Mhm.
And then you say, "I forgive them." You make the announcement, "I forgive them," and and then you don't really have a whole lot to do with the person after that,
Right.
and the family holds that against you.
Mhm.
Well, I thought you forgave them. Yeah, I forgave them. That don't mean I have to hang out with them.
Right.
Or if you forgave them, then you supposed to forgive them all the way. Well, what are you talking about? Forgive them all the way. This wasn't about them. This was about me.
Mhm.
See, one of the things that the other piece that we have a difficulty, see, that we want that all or nothing kind of do what situation, and that's again, I emphasize this often. One of the biggest trauma responses I see within our community is this all or nothing response to so much stuff.
Right.
You know, all or nothing, right? All or nothing, and it ain't all or nothing. It's
Right.
nuance,
Right.
right? If I forgive you, and you're still an ass, even
Right.
though I forgive you.
Right. It's like I deal with you different.
Yeah, I do. I
Mm.
got part of forgiveness is coming to a certain amount of truth, right? You as an ass, you are
Mhm.
selfish, and so um I forgive you because I don't wish to be angry at you no more. Matter of fact, you are amusing to me.
Right.
Okay, you
Right.
know, thing is, and so I have to deal with you that's in the way of my best interest. So when I
Mm.
do have interaction with you, if I choose, it'll be on my terms.
Right. Mhm.
My brother, I had one brother, man. I spent more time being angry at the Negro than loving him, which, which was which was a waste of time. You know what
Sure.
I'm saying? It's like, because he was having a party
Mm,
at my cost, and I'd be angry at him, and because there's all or nothing response about forgiveness, and then I would let down my guard, and he would do the same old thing because he was who he was. It all was
right.
about him,
Right.
right? And once I was able to um, really forgive him in a healthy way, I respected that from the standpoint he lived life the way he wanted to live life.
Hmm.
Now, I didn't like the way he lived life, right? And I didn't like the roadkill that his way of living life was. But that was, I had to respect this is who he was, and it
Mm,
probably, unfortunately, probably one of the reasons he died early too. But the
mm,
issue was I spent more time being angry at a dude who was just being happy being him, right?
sure.
And so when in my recovery, when I started understanding this whole thing about forgiveness, that it doesn't mean that the relationship has to be the same, made dealing with him much easier, right? I dealt with him when I was emotionally able to deal with him. I dealt with him with boundaries because everybody else in the family didn't have boundaries with him in the right way, and so when I started putting boundaries on him, like when we'd have family gatherings at my house, if he was because he was one of them kind of folks who would, he's that uncle or brother who when he gets his drink on, he would tell folks, he would tell my guests, you know, would give them orders, and he would say crazy shit like, "This is my brother's house, so it's like if it's my brother's house, it's like my house." Oh hell no!
Mm.
You ain't paid no mortgage payment here.
He wants some
Yeah,
authority. He wants some
yeah, right.
agency in the house.
He's the assume authority, and I can't be mad at him because I allowed him to do that in the past, right?
Right. Right.
Like how he is. And then when I started, setting the rules and limits, and so when he would act a fool or somebody would come talk to me, he's acting a fool or whatever, I would say, you got to go. You
Mm,
can't put me out of here. Oh no, this is my house. You got to go. You either go walking or you go sliding down the hill.
mhm.
There is the skid mark finally grew back on the hill. That skid mark had a booty print.
Mm,
Okay. It got so bad that his girlfriend at the time, um, when she would come to a function, she'd bring her own Tupperware set. She had a beautiful Tupperware set, plates that you could, they had dividers in it and that kind of stuff. And she brought it, and she would come in, and she would start fixing her a plate at the beginning of the evening, and at the beginning of the evening, she'd fix the plate. Now, and one day I asked her, "Why do you do that?" You know, well, I know he gonna do something that is going to irritate you, and I want to make sure I get my meal. Because well, you don't have to go when he go. Yes, I do. If I don't go when he go, then I'm gonna have to hear about it when we get home. And it got to be just that bad. But over time, folks would say, why don't he act the same way at your house? Because he wasn't no dummy. After a while, he was like, oh man, I can't be doing this in my house. So, yeah, he was still an ass,
right.
but he did one ass dealing with me, right? And that was the issue that I had to learn, but I had to do my work first to even get there to learn that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it takes a lot of self work to get to that place of forgiveness, and I think that's why that question of is it harder to forgive yourself or someone else is really tough because I think both of those things are necessary when harm's been done or mistreatment's been done. You have to have a level of getting yourself to a place where you can allow or accept what has happened to be what it is, and then you also have to figure out how do you deal with other person or the other people that are involved, and that's really hard for people to do.
Yeah, and I guess the point I was making with that story is the response of other people to my response to him, right? That whole thing about having maybe your mama or your grandparent or whoever come to you. So I thought you forgave them. Why ain't they here? Yeah, I forgave them, but I'm not feeling them today, right? And I'm not gonna let them do without, right? I'm not gonna let nothing happen to them, but I have to put some limits on how I deal with them because the thing is it is what it is, right? And that's that back to that all or nothing response that families, that pressure that family it put on you, right? And I think that's a big one, right? And again, as we go on in these weeks, the biggest thing in terms of doing the essence of healing oneself, especially within the community and the family, is being brave enough because forgiveness is about courage, you know,
Absolutely.
and being courageous enough to um, have some separation
Hmm.
because you might have some of that,
Yep.
right? You might have that moment where you feel like you're all alone, especially if you're from one of those real hardcore, uh, non-boundary kind of families,
Right.
right? Everybody's everybody,
Yep.
that would that collective ideal on steroids is what I call it. It's like everybody's in everybody else's business, and everybody's business is your business, and even the bad business is your business. And when you start setting boundaries so that you can get into that space of forgiveness and moving forward, the, the family might not be willing or ready to handle that,
Right. Right.
and that's a lot of pressure.
Yep.
But what I can say, if you stick to it, when you get to the other side, you'll be thankful.
Mm. Yeah.
But getting to the other side is a hard piece in the short term. But any kind of healing is painful in the
Hmm.
short term. You
Yep.
know, it's like surgery. Being afraid of the surgery due to the pain will keep people from getting surgery. I often tell the story about the guy with the bad knee.
Right.
He got a slight limp. Got some pain in his knees. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Well, it ain't too bad right now. We probably can just go in and do some laparoscopic surgery. We can do it in my office, and you'll be fine in a couple weeks." And the guy says, "Will it hurt?" "Oh yeah, there'll be some pain. It'll be some pain." Um, and the person goes away, doesn't schedule the surgery or the procedure. Several months later, he comes back. He's in more pain, limping more, and the doctor says, "Well," and then you come in and talk about, well, he come in and talk about, well, can we do the laparoscopic surgery? No, it's too, the damage has gotten worse. Now we're gonna have to do we're gonna have to go in and do a little more. Well, will it hurt? Oh yeah, it'll be painful. How long? Well, probably 3 to 4 weeks, but you should be fine. You go away, don't make the surgery, don't have the surgery, come back later on, and you can barely walk. Your wife is with him. His wife is with him now, and she rolls him in, and he goes see the doctor. The doctor says, we got to have major surgery on your knee. And he said, "Will it hurt?" He said, "Yeah, and it will be excruciating." And how long will it hurt? Maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And then he wants to roll out, and his wife says, "Oh no, you ain't." And she tells the doctor, "Do whatever you need to do. He ain't coming home with me." Right? So he reluctantly has the surgery, And 4 to 6 weeks after, he's mad at himself because he went through excruciating pain, more pain than he's been in a long time. But after 4 to 6 weeks, he's in less pain he's been in for years, right? And now he's mad at himself because he didn't do it sooner. And that's kind of the way healing goes. Now, I'm not saying you should be mad at yourself or whatever, but the thing is there's a reason why people don't get in line to heal. And
Yeah.
and like talking about it, but they ain't getting in line to do it. Now, when
Right.
I say heal, we're talking about doing some real serious personal work and coming to some personal truths. Like I said, a person that you're supposed to that you not supposed to give, but you're forgiving doesn't change from might not necessarily change from being an asshole. Sometimes you are the asshole.
Mm.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So there's some truths that you got to get to too, right?
Yep.
You know, and that's painful too. That everything people been saying about you is true.
Mm.
And because that's the other painful piece about healing. Sometimes you got to do an inventory or a what I call a family survey or environmental survey about the areas you need to heal that you need to possibly work in
Mm.
because you're blinded to it. You
Right.
feel all the repercussions, but you're blinded to it. So one of the biggest things, the most difficult things, is how truthful are you willing to be with yourself,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
What is it? And we're talking about forgiveness. What is it you think you're going to lose if you forgive this person? Are you going to
Mm.
lose the anger that motivates you every day? Because that's the other sad part about anger. Anger, we done been around this trauma thing. We done used anger to motivate us in such a way that sometimes we can't do without the anger or being
Right.
mad at somebody.
Right.
Right? I
Don't even know
mean,
how to function
right?
without it.
You know,
Hmm.
and and that's why when I talk to my clients about anger, we need to talk about your relationship with anger. What do you mean your relate? No, you got a relationship with that bad boy.
Mm.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about that relationship. All right. What is about anger that you're attracted to? And people are probably listening to, why would somebody be attracted to anger? Well, again, sometimes anger gives folks real motivation.
Right.
Not the right motivation, but give them some motivation.
Right.
Right. So 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 yeah, what is the worst thing gonna happen if you forgive this person?
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people say, well, they'll do it again. Well, they will do it again if you don't deal with if you don't get to a point. And I'm not saying you have to forgive somebody.
Right. Right.
See, it's a choice, right? It's about you. It ain't about them. It's about where you want to be in your life,
Hmm.
right? Because again, we associate forgiveness with courage. Because it's always a taking a risk, strength. You know, the the dignity to overcome humiliation, the freedom, regaining control over one's life. So it's a tough one, but again, I've often found it interesting that in our community, um, it's such a roadblock.
Right. Mm. I want to take it back for a second, to what you said about the comparison between anger and happiness. Because I think one of the reasons I think that it's easier to have that motivation over the anger versus having the happiness is that there's so many different things to be angry about. I mean, you could be angry about damn near anything, and it's an external type of thing. So you can find things to be angry about, which makes it a lot easier versus being happy. That's more of an internal process. And I think the reason why it's easier for people to maintain that anger versus maintain that happiness is that you have to do self work to maintain happiness. Like, can't nobody make you happy but you. And this is something we see in a lot of unhealthy relationships, is that they're seeking validation and happiness outside of themselves, which ultimately leads to all different levels of toxicity in the relationship. But when you're looking to be angry, you can find anything to be angry about. Most people aren't angry with themselves. And I think that's the battle when it comes to forgiveness. Is it's easier for me to harbor anger towards you than maintain the happiness within myself to move forward.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about when you was talking about this, um, happiness, love. The question come out to it, what is it? Right? I mean, because it comes down to how am I supposed to feel when I'm happy? When I've grown up so numb. You know what I'm saying? Because I sometimes because that's always been a difficulty for me for years is what is that, right?
Mhm.
I've been so comfortable with being unhappy. I don't know what do you mean, right?
Right.
Even the idea of love. That's the conversation. Sometimes we have a conversation in our group about the same thing. What does that mean? I know
Mhm.
what it says in a dictionary, right? But what does that mean? Because so many things that I've seen in doing this work with my clients, is that well, I love them, but all the behavior around that love is traumatic,
Right.
right? Um, and I think that's a result of being a people who's, especially if you have um, American trauma. You
Mhm.
have a history of American slavery in your past. Um, I think that has at times, and again, somebody listening, they go, I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just speculating. Okay. Now I might be able to dig it up later, but I'm just saying how
Mhm.
that has numbed our ability to, or numbed our ability to be happy because we're scared to be it because it'd be taken away.
Right. Mhm. So it's better to just not even consider it
Right.
than have the pain of having it taken away from us.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and the idea that we found for a lot of time we found happiness in such low levels,
Mhm.
you know, like I got clients who when you talk about happy is just the idea that they woke up today.
Yep, man, I talk about that all the time,
I
and
mean,
if that's your bare minimum, that's
right,
that's a clinically that's a scary place to be. Just from my clinical ear, it's
right.
like, man, like there's
And
so
and,
unless you
and,
got a
and
chronic illness,
yeah.
it should be a little bit more than that. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, and and I'm cruel sometimes. I said, is other people happy that you woke up? What are you doing to add to that? Right? I mean, and that's not nice. But I asked the question and it makes them think, right? And I know I have a good idea when I can ask that question when I can't. But the thing is when you've been at is like if is happy is here and you've been a below happy in your existence, how do you find that? Right? Especially if it's down here. Now, what do you got to do to, so and then you got some of my clients who find their happiness in destructive ways, and not only in destructive ways, but destroying other people, shaming and all these other things, and I think that also feeds into what we got now with Twitter and all these other kind of stuff. I find my happiness in your misery, you know and so again I'm just theorizing that when you are your experience in this country starts with misery, right? and you go generations of that, or that whole fear of bad things happening, in the community, that whole ideal that bad things happens in threes, right? And you're so afraid that when the one bad thing happened, you have to you try so hard to keep an eye on the next bad thing, but because you are diverting your life from being normal, those other three, you kind of make those other bad things happen, or just little things that just happen ends up being a bad thing, right? And so those emotional safety measures we developed over the years, right? Um, um, and yeah, the emotional safety mechanisms not to get too happy, so you don't get too disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, that measure of expectations of how to determine what the outcome is going to be is another, I think, detriment to our ability to forgive and to continue to move forward, because you can't determine how things are going to work out. You can take steps to try to prevent things, but people will respond to you a particular way. You might have emotional responses that you weren't prepared for, given the nature of how things work out. And that's the risk that you take in the healing process in utilizing forgiveness. And I think since people can't have an automatic result for what's going to happen, they don't even try because they're fearful of, what's on the other side of that. And again, I always say the quote, and it's not my original quote, but it is a quote that's important, is that there's no growth, uh, there's no comfort in the growth zone, and there's no growth in the comfort zone. And that's one of the realest quotes, because it is uncomfortable work. And if you're not willing to go there and be in that space of discomfort, what ends up ultimately happening is you stay stuck where you're at. Even when it's painful, we'll stay there because at least we know it. We can predict the pain, we can take the pain, and many of us have accepted it. But you have to be able to be willing to take that risk to do something different. And sometimes that comes with isolation. Sometimes it comes with different types of emotional exposure, and sometimes it comes with just different actions from yourself, and most people don't want to take those.
Yeah. So, um, folks who are just checking in now, they're trying to figure out, what are these people talking about? What our main topic has been forgiveness,
Hmm.
and um, what does it mean? And what and the big thing is, we do know that it doesn't mean to forget what happened,
Hmm.
right? That whole thing about forgive and forget, it just don't compute, right? And I often tell people, if I forgot what happened, I wouldn't be doing what I do now.
Right.
You know, because I tell those stories of what happened, and it's very um, important to make peace with what happened, more than trying to stuff what happened, so that you can be move forward, because we got enough roadblocks, especially as Black
Right.
people, in front of us, to build emotional roadblocks ourselves, right?
Right.
And I know that the more I have made peace with every craziness I've had, because again, when we talk about holding grudges, I was raised by the grudge master.
Mm.
My mother, she held grudges, and I mean, she held grudges on top of grudges, but
Hmm.
but she had unrealistic expectations of people, right? Like when she would have. I remember I ran into one of her old girlfriends when my father died,
Hmm.
and and she came to the funeral, and she was a good friend of my mother's, and I always wondered what happened, right? And she says she didn't really understand what happened either, but she thinks it was that she didn't always take mama's side when it came to my daddy.
Yeah.
You know, that
Mm.
loyalty thing. It's like because she said there was sometimes she wasn't right. You know, no, I loved her to death, but there was some things that just wasn't cool, right?
Mhm.
And I think she says, and I think because of that, um, she just kind of broke away from her. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And so, um, and there was many of those stories after Mama died, right?
Mhm.
About folks not being loyal, not being loyal to her, but not being loyal to her grudges.
Right. Mhm. Mm.
You know, not being loyal to the grudges.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and again, unfortunately, there's some people that is their lifeline.
Right. Yep.
Keeps them,
Yeah.
keeps them alive, right?
Yep. Keeps
It's like,
things interesting, keeps them
yeah, it's like,
engaged. They're the
wow,
topic of conversation, they're the focal
right.
point of the family. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, man. Oh, man, you used to and I was just thinking about in my family, on both sides of my family, we had grudge loyalties from different sets of cousins and stuff. It's like it was like Hatfield and McCoys within the family, right? And it's like, and some of them were started by the parents, right? And the kids were supposed to automatically go along with it. It's like, what are you talking about? I like my cousin. Well, you shouldn't be talking. What the heck is all that noise? I remember I think I got beat down a couple times for, showing loyalty to a cousin I didn't know I was supposed to be, or showing some kind of concern for a cousin that I was supposed to not show no concern because of the grudge of the parents. It's like, really? So some of this stuff is passed down, right? And this inability to forgive is also another reason I think some with the younger generation, they have such difficulty sometimes with church or organized religion.
Not on a Sunday. Don't go there now. We only got 8 minutes left.
Oh, I ain't scared.
Why do you think that? What do you think the church's influence is, Sam?
Oh, you tell me not to go there and then you just go there. What's wrong with you?
I gotta get my Larry King on. I gotta ask the questions.
See, you see, you're gonna get me started. I'm gonna say something, and then they're gonna tell uh, no, I'm just saying that you know, um, sometime depending on which nomination or church you go to or what pastor, because see, we can go to a nomination, but depending on who the pastor is, that can change very much. But the confusion around forgiveness sometimes get in the way of young people because young people are more open to more ideals, right? Young people are open to more different kind of people. And when I say different kind of people, uh, people who in old school churches uh, um, don't fit, right? And then again, you got the other extreme of being told to forgive stuff, some horrific stuff, but nobody wants to talk about the stuff,
Right. Just
right?
let it go.
Just let it go, right?
Mhm.
Like sexual assault and those kind of things.
Mm.
You know, uh, uh, you know, put it in God's hands. Well, yeah, okay. But I'm still dealing with a person who violate me every Sunday,
Mm.
right? And or within the family. And I know that, in the old school church, when like my mom would go and talk to the pastors about, my father, because when he would get drunk, he want to fight. And
Yeah.
and and they try to make it sound like it was her who had the problem. So um I know that some churches have progressed past that, but
Mhm.
again, that whole confusion around forgiveness, where we started at. Um, for some folks, I think it's connected with that. Um, which that'll be another the conversation about
Mm,
the church is a bigger conversation that we can
yeah,
have later.
yeah.
But we got about maybe about how many? About 5 minutes, 4 minutes.
About 5 minutes. Yeah. Let's answer Val's question that she dropped um via Facebook. She said, "What's at the genesis of holding a grudge?" What are your thoughts on that? What's that origin? What's that centerpiece around holding a grudge for people?
Feel like they're gonna lose something.
Mm, straight to it.
Feel like they're gonna lose a part of them, right? It comes back to the worst thing is gonna happen if you let it go. If you really want to find out about the genesis of something, ask the person that question. What would be the worst thing if you let it go? So what would be the worst thing? And you can add any words you want to it. If I didn't learn nothing in terms of therapy, doing therapy, which I never learned enough, I don't think, in doing therapy. But that was one question that my therapist used to throw at me all the time. So what is the worst thing going to happen if you're going to happen if you leave your wife, or what's the worst thing to happen uh, 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 if your child is gay, right? What is the
Mhm.
worst thing going to happen? And when a person really sinks into that question,
Right.
whoa, you'll be surprised what comes out with
Right.
the answer.
Yep. And I would add that a lot of times the answer revolves around the person's sense of control. And I
Yes.
think that that's what happens with a lot of grudges is when there's outcomes that you don't have full control over, people tighten up. Because we want our environments, we want our sense of what's going on, our relationships to be things that we identify them as. And when we don't have control over those things, then that's when we get uncomfortable. And I think sometimes you just gotta accept stuff for what it is and understand that you ain't gonna control every outcome. Like
But
when you start working on yourself, people gonna respond different and you can't control that. Go ahead.
But the other piece is it's control tied to some type of trauma or
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, that's why I asked the question, "What's the worst thing going to happen?"
Right. Right.
And it's tied in historical trauma or fear,
Hmm.
right? And I've seen when I've asked that question of clients, because see, the reasons I don't do one-on-one therapy anymore is because I don't have the kind of patience. I don't know if I ever had the patience I needed to do it. And so I would cut to the chase and just ask the question, what's
Hmm.
the worst thing gonna happen if none of this changes? If they don't change, what's the worst thing gonna happen? And the looks on their faces would be like a movie. Their whole demeanor would change. They would
Hmm.
sit up and if they and almost the voice would change
Mm.
and they would give that answer. And it wouldn't be that many words.
Right.
And it might even be the word "I'll lose control,"
Mm.
or it might be the words "I'll lose," or it might be uh, then they would be right. Those. I mean, just matter of fact. This matter of fact. You know. Uh, uh, but that yeah. So in terms of that grudge thing, you know, what are you gonna lose? It's
Right.
it's it's the fear of being wrong or uh, uh, um, especially if you had a grudge for a long time,
Yeah.
you dig in deeper and deeper and that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And then on top of that, for a person who hasn't felt any control, and I think this is also ties back to the history of trauma in our community. When you are uh, in a position of not feeling in control of your life or feeling like you never had no control, a grudge is one thing you can control,
Hmm.
or at
Yep.
least feel like it.
Yep, because that's you. That's your
Yeah.
power. That's your locus of control right there. So, all right, folks, we're gonna get ready to wrap it up for today. We thank you for joining us for another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. Today, we discussed forgiveness, and we encourage you all to think about how has forgiveness played a role in your life and on your healing journey. Any final words for folks, Sam?
Yes, and forgiveness is not about everybody else, it's about you, and you deserve it.
Absolutely. On that note, folks, take care. We will see you next week with another episode of the Healing Brothers podcast. Peace.